Welcome to a VATAS training video. Today we will cover premium pay at regular rate. The premium pay at regular rate codes are used when you have non-paid leave along with overtime. We will also show how to clear the PPV VA5 and the PPV VA65 errors. But first, let's define some of these codes. The first two regular rate codes are OU, unscheduled time paid at regular rate, and OS, scheduled time paid at regular rate. The next two are specifically used for Title 38 or any employees with the appropriate entitlements. OW, Saturday time paid at regular rate, and OD, Sunday time paid at regular rate. This next graphic shows how they are translated, but please note that all these codes are to be used when you have non-paid leave and overtime within the same pay period and will have to be manually added to the timesheet. So now we are at the timesheet and we'll go into select employees to try to find the employee that we're looking for, and it's this GS employee. So we'll click on this to go into the timesheet, and the first step we'll do when we get onto the timesheet is hit validate, and this will show us the error that we were talking about. And sure enough, it says daily overtime entitlement. Non-paid time must be met before overtime can exist. So it's on 10/1. So we'll go on to 10/1 to find out what is happening there. So we'll see it here. They have leave without pay for 2 hours and they have overtime for 2 hours. Now, since this overtime unscheduled was already approved by the supervisor and TL approver, as a timekeeper, we're going to have to communicate to our supervisor and TL approver to deny this request so we can manually add this overtime at regular rate into the timesheet instead. Now that we've had that request denied, we'll go back into the timesheet and we'll go back into that Monday where that overtime happened. Now we need to add that in manually, so we'll start by hitting add work time. And add work time is going to give us a blank entry, so we're going to have to put this in all ourselves. So we'll put from 4:30 p to 6:30 p, which is when they worked. And we'll go over to this hours drop down and we'll click that, and all the way at the bottom is where these regular rate codes are going to be. So we'll select OU, unscheduled time paid at regular rate. Now that we've manually added it in, we'll hit validate, and sure enough, this timesheet is going to validate successfully. In this next example, we're going to show you when it's okay to have overtime and non-paid leave. So if we go into Wednesday, we'll see that on Wednesday, this employee is working 2 hours of overtime unscheduled from 4:30 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. But on Monday, this employee had 2 hours of leave without pay, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Again, if we go back to Wednesday, we see that they have 2 hours of overtime and 2 hours of leave without pay. But when we hit validate, the timesheet validates successfully. This happens because they are hitting their overtime entitlement of 8 hours in a day. Therefore, the 4:30 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. is valid because they are hitting the overtime entitlement. For this next example, we're going to go back to select employees. We're going to go into the timesheet for my full-time general schedule employee. And the first thing we're going to do is hit validate to see that PPV VA5 error. And sure enough, here it is, and it tells us on what day. So we go to 10/6. And we see this employee has 4 hours of overtime scheduled. But we know that on Monday, they had 2 hours of AWOL, of non-paid leave. So on Saturday, when we go back to it, 2 hours of it is going to be paid at regular rate, and 2 hours of it is going to be actually valid. So we need to talk to our supervisor and our TL approver so that we can make the necessary changes on the premium pay request for only 2 hours of overtime scheduled, and we would manually add in the overtime scheduled at regular rate. After we've edited that premium pay request, so we'll go back into the timesheet, And now we see that they only have 2 hours of overtime from 10 to 12, and they still have the 2 hours on Monday for absent without leave, a non-pay code. So if we hit validate, we are still going to get that error. So we need to make up those 2 hours of AWOL, of non-pay. So we would come back to Saturday and we would hit add work time. When we hit add work time, we put 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. We would click the hours code. We scroll all the way to the bottom where that's where the codes are. Select the appropriate code, overtime scheduled, time paid at regular rate, and we would hit validate. Now this employee will have 2 hours of overtime scheduled at regular rate and 2 hours of overtime scheduled. This next example is going to be very similar to the one previously. So we go into select employees. We find our GS employee, our general schedule employee, go into the timesheet and hit validate. Again, this is going to show us the PPV VA5 error, and it tells us that something is happening on 10/6. So we go into 10/6, and instead of overtime, we see comp time earned. The same thing is happening on Monday as before, is this employee had AWOL, a non-pay code, along with comp time earned. So comp time and overtime are going to be treated the exact same way. So because this has been already approved by both levels, we need to have that reverted and changed to only 2 hours. Once that is done, we'll go back into the timesheet. We review to make sure that was done correctly. And sure enough, we only have 2 hours here. We're going to see that PPVA5 error. So we need to make up those 2 hours of non-pay code of AWOL. So we'll go back to Saturday. And once we're on Saturday, just like all the other examples, we'll hit add work time. And we'll put in the appropriate times. So from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. And again, like I mentioned before, comp time is going to be treated the exact same way as overtime. So this would be OU or OS, unscheduled or scheduled time paid at regular rate. Now, if we hit validate, it's going to validate because they have hit that 80-hour increment, and they are entitled to those 2 hours of comp time. This next example is going to be for a Title 38 employee, but you can use it as a reference for anyone who has those extra entitlements. So we'll go first into the Title 38 employee's timesheet. In this case, we'll hit validate so we can view that error. And this would be the error PPV VA 65. And we know that there's something going on 10/1. So we'll go to 10/1. When we go to 10/1, we see that this employee has 2 hours of non-paid leave and 2 hours of overtime. Now, the 2 hours of overtime needs to be denied first before we can go ahead and do anything on the timesheet. So we would need to communicate that to our supervisor. Once we've done that, we'll go back into select employees. We'll go back into the employee's timesheet. We'll go back to the day in question. And once we're here, we would need to add those hours. So we'll start by hitting add work time. And this would be from 4:30 p.m. until 6:30 p.m. But note, this employee is entitled to 30 minutes of night differential. The hours code, we'd click that and we'd scroll all the way down, and we would use scheduled time paid at regular rate. Once we've selected the appropriate code, we would scroll down and hit validate. And now we see that the timesheet has validated successfully. This next example is going to be for a Title 38 employee. We will go into Select Employees and find the employee that we want to work with. We will click to get into their timesheet, and once we are in the timesheet, we will hit Validate. Validate will show us the PPV VA 65 error, along with telling us there's something going on 10/6. When we click on Saturday 10/6, we see the employee has 4 hours of Saturday overtime. But we know that this employee had 2 hours of leave without pay on Monday. In order to rectify this, we will need to fix the premium pay request to reflect only 2 hours. So if we go to Saturday, we would communicate to our supervisor to approve only 2 hours. Once we've done so, we can find this employee and go back into their timesheet. Once we go to Saturday, we see that they only have 2 hours of Saturday overtime for a Title 38. If we hit Validate, we still get the exact same error of PPV VA 65. That is because they still have 2 hours of leave without pay on Monday. So we need to make up those extra 2 hours as overtime Saturday paid at regular rate. We'll hit Add Work Time, and this would be from 8 a.m. until 10 a.m. In the drop down, we would click on that and we'd scroll all the way to the bottom, and the code that we would use is Saturday time paid at regular rate T38 for Title 38. Once we've done so, we will scroll down and hit Validate, and we will see that the timesheet validated successfully. We do still have a warning, but that warning is okay. In this video, we have shown you premium pay codes at regular rate. Make sure to visit our SharePoint for additional videos and trainings.